court and stuff like that for contract disputes. So we had some good layers of laws built in and stuff into what this real world is. And then over time, you know, as societies grew and the intricacies of our relationships grew and stuff, they realized the real world basically dealt with law as common law. You know, common sense, common law, basically the essence of God's laws, do unto others you want them to do unto you. So it came there for if somebody stepped outside of that balance. But they realized what common law really was just man's interpretations of God's laws, and you know, in the history, the interpretation was slightly off, so they had to bring in some other layers like equity law and make statutes. Like in common law, there's no such thing as fraud. So that's why we had to have the statute of fraud is one of our oldest statutes. Because in common law, everybody's 100% personally responsible. You could have said no. So again, we started realizing, you know, there was some inequity out there under the common law, so they created some layers of statute laws, good ones, like the Partnership Act and the Mortgage Act and some really good statute laws. But then over time, they started adding these other layers. And these are the layers we're going to look at. Basically, we call them benefit layers, okay? We'll give a few names of some of them. There's many of them, and you need to look at it. But CPP, EI, income taxes out of CPP, say WCB, and all these benefit layers that they keep adding on. This is what we call these benefit layers, is what we're really going to focus on tonight, to show you how they actually relate to you. Because we believe this is what's causing a lot of that frustration and stress. Without understanding the multidimensional aspect of our legal system, we think when someone says obey the law, what does your mind do? You clump all laws onto one level. But when you actually look at it, if someone says obey the law, you can say, which law? Does it even apply to me? And so that's where we see the tension coming in, because we as natural persons, real persons, we think we're living in a real world, but what's happening as more and more of these statutes get created and benefit programs get created, and we think they're mandatory, it draws us into them. And that's what's putting that pressure. But I don't want that. I don't want to be. Where did you get the right to make me do this and do that, right? Our whole goal here is, even as short as tonight is to give you enough information that you can see this yourself. And what we hope that'll do, it'll start putting this all into perspective and putting this back in balance by knowing who you are in this real world and how you relate to the legal world, okay? You'll be able to start looking at these for what they are and then picking and choosing, because there's nothing wrong with them if you want them. But that's what causes that frustration if you think you're being forced into something. Now we need to look at, and we don't spend a lot of time in here, who created this whole illusion and why they did it. It's really immaterial in the big picture. You can call them whatever you want, but in reality they're nothing more than a few self-proclaimed elitists who devised the scheme to economically enslave the citizens of this country. The reason it's immaterial, because if you would spend some time to learn who you are, they will dissolve. They only have their powers because we forgot who we were. So here's this, basically the background or the essence of this illusion. This one quote here, it's out of the private memoirs of Colonel Edward Mantle House with Woodward Wilson. And I like it because it's to the point. It's a few paragraphs long, but it just lays it out to the point. Now, up until about 3, 4, maybe a month ago, I always put it up here as unsubstantiated because I never could find the source. And we were doing a seminar, and a guy comes up and says, oh no, I know where that came from. Because a lot of people across this country are finding it. So I used to keep it in there as unsubstantiated because I figured it expressed what we're trying to explain in a very few, to show you the illusion in a very few paragraphs, but also as a way that if you weren't ready to see things for what they are, like to say the illusion's treating you very well, you got a great life. You know, I sort of used it as, here's your excuse to disregard everything else you're going to learn, because we didn't have a substantiated one. I usually put a warning, and that, hey, if you do have a comfortable illusion, you may want to leave. Because there's a reality is, once, you know, it's a quote basically, once the mind's expanded, it will never return to the same size. What we're going to go through tonight is indisputable, verifiable facts that you can pick up and see yourself. And it's going to maybe be disturbing, but maybe be empowering too. So it depends where you're at in life and how attached to the system you are, I guess. He goes on to say in there, he goes, very soon every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being able to work and earn a living. Starting to sound familiar? They will be our chattels, our property, and we will hold security interest over them forever by operation of law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwillingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they'll be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. We're going to show you how this is being applied even today. After all, this is the only logical way to fund governments, by floating liens and debts to the registrants in the forms of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly, and the people will become helpless and without any hope of their redemption, and will employ the high office of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. That's short, sweet, to the point, and it's very brutal. Who would even contemplate that there would be something going on? Okay? And again, I liked it when it was unsubstantiated, because it gave a person to say, well, I don't want to believe it. Good, don't. So I added in some substantiated quotes. This one's from Woodrow Wilson out of his book entitled The New Freedom in 1913. He goes, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." And that's a president of a country. You know, again, we're starting to see it more and more on the news, because they're becoming more brazen. They talk about it, those secret governments, the one world orders and stuff. Where did this cycle, what we're living in is a cycle. Now we're in a new cycle, and where this cycle started, it was really back with a bunch of brothers, I think it was 5 of them, called the Rothschild brothers. And they understood how money could be used to economically enslave a person without them really knowing it. He goes on to say in here, one of the brothers, he goes, "The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class." These are all the people who have a vested interest in enslaving everybody. But they go on to go, "The great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantages to them, will bear its burden without complaint." So unless you fall into this category, I'm assuming they're calling all us mentally incapable to understand what they're doing. So I took offense to that, and hope you do. So again, this illusion that we're talking about, it really boils down to the shackles, the main thread. You know, we go through this room, and I guarantee you there's got to be 20, 30, 40 different occupations. We all come from different backgrounds, different everything. But the one thing we have in common, the common thread, is income tax. And that's why we really picked it as the example, as the topic, to actually show you the illusion. Because when you can see through that illusion, because how are we taught? What is income tax? It's as certain as death, right? Not the only thing certain as death is taxes, right? But when we can see through it, and you can see, wow, we've been lied to on that, you'd start looking and using it in other areas. So in Canada and worldwide, this illusion was created out of greed and can only affect us if we forgot who we are and believe it to be the truth. And as broad and interwoven as this illusion is with reality, the main thread of the deception is income tax, and it's this common shackle that affects us all. So it's the best place also for us to start our search for our freedom, because if you can take control of that part of your life, the other ones don't even seem as bad. It's really simple. You know, again, we've reverse engineered this whole thing from where we were in court and the amount of information we had, trying to reverse engineer it down to a few words. Actually, I was challenged by a CFO of a company. We were in a meeting with their big accountants and stuff, and the guy's real prompt. He goes, "Give it to me in 25 words or less." It's like, yeah, right. We got like tons of information. But I took him up on the challenge, and I got it down to 5 words or less. I was really happy. Here they are, to really release these shackles from yourself in relation to income tax. 5 words or less. Quit working for the taxpayer. When your education gets to the point where you truly understand what those 5 words actually just said, you will be free the rest of your life, because you'll never fall back into the same trap again. The 2 words, see, all you gotta do is quit working. You don't have to worry about taxes either. So how did these shackles get forged in Canada? Where did it really, like, again, we looked at some American documents, but when we really start getting deep into this, we realize, although the United States has a common law foundation, they threw in other layers. So Canada really is fundamentally different. And as you progress in your study, you'll actually, be very thankful you live in Canada, because we have literally probably one of the purest systems there. We're already free. We just don't know it. We get caught up into this thing. So how did these income tax start here in Canada? It's all started in 1913, when Canada passed the Bank Act and surrendered its power to print and issue currency to a few self-proclaimed elitists, the private bankers. The international bankers now control the federal government and the monetary system, and since then have created laws like the Income Tax Act to economically enslave people of this country. And it's with this economic control